Hi everyone, I'm Miss Krysten Thomas and welcome to my CSEC Integrated Science series. Here we'll break down concepts and go through notes and make learning integrated science simple and easy to understand since I realized there's a lack of this on YouTube, especially when I'm teaching this subject to my private tutoring students. So the topic that I decided to start with, is the third topic in the syllabus in section E, which is understanding sexual reproduction in plants. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the structure of flowers. This is the basic structure that you need to know. Um, So the structure of it, it's made up of many parts. You have the stamen, which is the male part. You have the carpel, which is the female part. And then other than that, you have your petal, your sepal, and your receptacle. So basically it says flowers are essential for sexual reproduction in plants, comprising of male and female parts and supporting structures, like I just said. The importance of the petal is so that, well, the supporting structure, I should say, is to attract the insects when it comes to pollination. And pollination is a topic that will be coming up next. So the functions of the flower parts, like you see over here, there are different functions, right? So we're going to look at each function. So the petals, the main part of the petals is to attract pollinators. Oops, I'm sorry. Right, the main part is to attract pollinators. The sepals protects the buds before it opens. So you could just think about like at night when a flower is closed, you have the little green part around it, that's the sepal. Then you have the male parts. Now, the male and female parts in a plant, it has the same purpose in terms of human reproduction, is just to help with reproduction in plants. So you have the anther, which as we can see is over here, this little top piece here, the anther, the little sticky piece, especially if you're looking at a hibiscus plant, which is something that you would probably have done in primary school. So we have the anther, and it produces and stores the pollen. I'm so sorry, what is happening? Right, so you have the anther, which produces and stores pollen, and then you have the filament, which is the stalk that holds up the anther. And then, yeah, that's basically it. Very basic for the male parts, kind of like males in real life, but moving on. Um, Carpel, which is the female part, you have the stigma, you have the style, and you have the ovary. So the stigma, let's go back here so you can see. Go back, go back. So you have your stigma, which is the part on top. Then you have the style, which is the middle part here. And then you have the ovary, which is inside the bottom part here, right? You would also see this in a hibiscus plant. So starting from the top, you have the stigma, and the stigma actually receives the pollen. You have the style, which is the tube that connects the stigma to the ovary, and then the ovary, it actually contains the ovules, which are the female gametes. Did I say that correctly? Forgive me if I didn't. Um, but you have the ovules inside of the ovary. So that's basically the functions of each part. Now we look at pollination. So pollination is the transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma, which is the transfer of the pollen from the male part to the female part. This can take place in two ways. The two main types would be cross-pollination and self-pollination. According to your syllabus, they mainly looked at cross-pollination and they just touch on self-pollination a little bit, but the main focus is on cross-pollination. So we have self-pollination, which is where the flower pollinates itself, as you can see here. And then the cross-pollination is where like the pollen from one plant goes to the next plant. And this can be done through either pollination via insects or wind dispersal, which we would look at afterwards. So you have self-pollination. So the pollen lands for self-pollination, like the first one here. The pollen, and remember the pollen comes from the top of the anther. The pollen lands on the stigma of the same flower on the same plant. And some examples of these would be like tomatoes, peas, and okra. Trinidad, we say okra, right? Uh, Okra is just the universal name or whatever. So then that's basically it for self-pollination. Cross-pollination was looked at a bit more in detail. So the pollen lands on the stigma of another flower on the same plant. So it's the same type of plant. It just comes from a different flower. So this can be seen in hibiscus, coconut, pumpkin, orchid, all very local examples of cross-pollination. So cross-pollination of the plants, how does it work? Well, basically, the little bee or insect or whatever, it's attracted to the flower, right? The petals, because that's the purpose of the petals, like we learned earlier. So it takes the um well when how should I say it? Should say this. So it takes the so when it's attracted to the flower and it buzzes around like the pollen, the pollen sticks to the insect. And then when it goes to another flower and it buzzes around the other flower, it then is deposited into the stigma, as you can see here. If you want, you can always pause the video for the diagram, but this is just like a brief overview of each topic that I plan on doing for that just to help with revision or maybe past paper questions and you just need a review on the topic. So that's basically how it works. It just buzzes from flower to flower and the pollen sticks on one flower and it's the pollen from the anther sticks to the insect and when it buzzes to another plant, it is deposited on the stigma when it buzzing around the plant. And that's basically it. Very simple. Um, the reason why cross-pollination is important or if you want to know the advantages of cross-pollination, it increases genetic variation. So all the plants may not be the same. You might have crossover of plants. Because of cross-pollination as well, you'll have healthier offspring of plants, healthier plants because of the genetic variation. This point here is a very important point. It says greater chance of disease resistance. So when you have genetic variation and a disease hits, all the plants will die because of the variations in the plant itself. And then you tend to get better qualities from seeds and fruits when you have cross-pollination going on. So next you have agents of pollination. Like I mentioned earlier, you have two different types of pollination taking place. It can either be done by the wind or animals, mainly insects. I would show you briefly on the different animals besides insects, but it's not a part of the syllabus. That's just for your own personal knowledge. So we're looking at wind pollination first. So wind pollination is the pollination of plants by means of pollen carried by the wind. When the breeze blow hard, the pollen just goes across to the next plant. Very simple. Very, very simple. Um, this picture is very blurred. I should probably replace this. But wind and sometimes water, but we only looking at wind pollination in the CSEC Integrated Science syllabus. One can carry pollen from the anthers to the stigma, as seen in the corn plant. So it just blows, and that's how it's very self-explanatory here with the diagram, right? So next. Advantages of wind pollination. So these flowers are small and dull colored. They don't really have any scents or nectars, and light pollen are easily carried by the wind. And some examples of wind pollination where it is successful would be like maize, corn, and grass. That's your two main types that's easy to remember for examples of wind pollination. So then we have animal or insect pollination. And animal or insect pollination is a process where animals, primarily insects, transfer pollen from one flower to another. Very simple. It's like the diagram with the bee that we saw earlier. So you have mainly insects and some other animals that contribute to this. The birds, rodents, reptiles, squirrels, monkeys, and even sometimes people pollinate, not literally, just when like they're doing like when they cross in plants and stuff, and humans are doing that themselves, that is what they are referring to. So what are some advantages of animal or insect pollination? Well, the flowers are very bright and scented and they are full of nectar because you know that's the purpose. They have to attract the insects or the animals. And then the pollen, excuse me, it tends to be sticky or spiky and again, some very popular examples of animal insect pollination would be hibiscus, sunflowers, and orchids.